it.
Now this is the second resurrection here. Great white throne and him that sat on it. Go ahead and read on.
From whose face the earth and the heaven fled away, and there was found no place for them.
Go ahead.
And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God. And the books were opened.
Go ahead.
And another book was opened.
See what I said? The books was open and another book was open. Go ahead and read on.
Which is the book of life. And the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books according to their works.
Go ahead and read.
And the sea gave up the dead which were in it. And death and hell delivered up the dead which were in them.
Now he said, and death and hell delivered up the dead that was in him. I want to read you some here, a definition about hell here. We reading this time from the Revell Bible Dictionary, and we reading about hell on page 270. Okay, go ahead and read what's underlined there in red, right up there. Go ahead and read.
Hell. Translated hell only in King James Version.
Now say in the King James Version, that's what we're reading out of. It was translated from Hebrew and Greek. So it was translated in the King James Version, the version that we're looking at. Go ahead and read.
Actually means death or the grave.
Now hell actually means death or the grave. That's what it means in some cases. Go ahead. Finish that.
Greek Hades.
Greek Hades. But it was translated what in the did it say in the Old Testament?
Oh, okay. Right here.
Yes.
The great.
No, it says Sheol.
Oh, Sheol. Okay. Yeah, Sheol. S-H-E, and they have an apostrophe in between the E and the O-L.
Okay.
Yep.
And then it was in the Greek, it was Hades. H-A-D-E-S.
Right, in the Greek Hades.
So now, when they translated out of the Old Testament, they translated Sheol, which means grave. And when they translated out of the New Testament, they translated from Hades, which means grave.
Yes, sir.
So now, this is what, go ahead, read that 13th verse again. Go ahead and read that.
And the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and hell delivered up the dead which were in them.
Now he said, and death and hell delivered up the dead that was in them. Let's go and read a little bit more.
And they were judged every man according to their works.
Go ahead and read.
And death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death.
Now he said death and hell was cast into the lake of fire, right? Let's go to Revelation chapter 21 now and pick it up at verse 3. Revelation 21 began reading at verse 3. 21 and 3. That's why the Lord cast death and hell in the lake of fire, or grave, because that is what it means, grave. Start reading at Revelation 21, verse 3. Go ahead and read.
And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men.
That's when the Father himself is about to ascend and dwell with man. Go ahead and read on.
And he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them and be their God.
Go ahead.
And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death.
He said there shall be no more death. That's why he cast hell and death in the lake of fire. You know, if man ain't gonna die no more, then what you need with a grave? You don't need no grave, do you? So that's why he said he cast death and hell in the lake of fire. Death and what we call hell, which is simply the grave.
Yes, sir.
Don't need it no more, because man ain't gonna die no more.
That's right.
Man will be immortal from that time forth. Let's go now to 1 Kings chapter 2, and we'll begin reading at verse 10. 1 Kings 2, and we'll pick it up at verse 10. 2 and 10. 2 and 10. We're going to take a look at David here. Show you what happened to David. Just make it real simple. You understand what I'm saying? Sir. 2 and 10. 1 Kings 2 and 10. David, a man after God's own heart, he went the way of all of the other men that have lived and walked on the face of this earth. And the Lord said he's a man after my own heart. Sir. And we know David going to be in the kingdom, right?
That's right.
Because the book said David will be king over all of the nation of Israel. So now he's going to be in the kingdom. Make no mistake about that. But I'm going to show you what happened to David. 2 and 10. Go ahead and read.
So David slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David.
Now that's what David did. He died just like everybody else died. You understand what I'm saying? And he slept with his fathers and he was buried in the city of David. Now he's a righteous man.
That's right.
Because the Lord said he was a man after his own heart. So we know he's a righteous man. But what happened to him? He died and he was buried. What verse are we?
I just read verse 10.
Okay, go ahead and read.
And the days that David reigned over Israel were 40 years. 7 years reigned he in Hebron, and 33 years reigned he in Jerusalem.
So now, in other words, David died and he slept with his father, and they buried him. That's what the book said, right? Let's go now to Acts chapter 2, and we'll pick it up at verse 29. Read something here in the New Testament about this same David, Acts chapter 2. And we're going to read verse 29. We're going to come back and deal with this second chapter of Acts a little more later. But now I want you to read verse 29. Then I want you to read verse 34. 29 and Acts 2, verse 29, and then read verse 34. Go ahead and read.
Men and brethren, let me freely speak unto you of the patriarch David,
go ahead,
that he is both dead and buried, and his sepulchre is with us unto this day.
So now here Peter is years later, maybe 500 or 600 years or so later. He said David is dead and buried, and his sepulchre, he said, was with us even unto that day. 500 years later, so they was still dead and buried. You understand what I'm saying? And he said sepulchre, which is his grave, it was still with him. Let's go now. Skip down to verse 34. Go ahead and read.
For David is not ascended into the heavens.
So David did not ascend into heaven. He's dead and buried, and his body was still in that grave. And I can say it's still in the grave even unto this day. Because it is not time yet for the righteous to be raised. Then we read in 1 Corinthians 15 chapter that Christ the first fruits, afterwards those that belong to him at his coming.
Yes, sir.
Well, he ain't made his coming yet. That means the righteous dead is still in the grave, then, right?
Yes, sir.
And he said clearly here that David did not ascend into heaven. Now, he a man after God's own heart. If he didn't go to heaven, I can't imagine nobody else going.
Sir.
Tell the truth.
Finish that verse, and we're going to move on.
But he said himself, the Lord said unto my Lord,
go ahead,
sit thou on my right hand until I make thy foes thy footstool.
Now, we're going to get back to this a little bit later, but now let's go to Luke chapter 23. Because there's another scripture they use to try to get you to heaven. And they got a scripture here and there they will use to try to get you to heaven. That's why I took you all through all of this other stuff first. So that when you get to these things, you can understand. If you don't understand what it is saying, you'll understand what it's not saying.
That's right. That's right, brother.
That's why I had to take you through all that stuff, let you know clearly what the Bible said happened to the dead. You know, they live, after that they go to the dead, body go back to the dust, and the breath go back to God that gave. Everybody know that. That's clear, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So now anything else that might appear to be saying something else, you'll know somewhere that it ain't saying what you have been told that it's saying. So they got a verse here and there that they will use to try and get you to heaven, in spite of all of the clear teaching of the Bible. How many times did we read that man died, the body go back to the dust, and the breath go back to God? We read it several times, didn't we? Even when the Lord created man in the beginning, you know what he said to Adam? Dust you are, and dust you shall return.
Yes, sir.
And that has been the way of man ever since Adam.
Yes, it has.
You don't need to go no further. We could have just read that and case closed.
Yes, sir.
But now, we had to go in Psalms and read it, didn't we?
Sir.
Then we had to go in Ecclesiastes and read it, didn't we? Then we had to go over in the New Testament and find out that the man was still in the ground until Jesus said the hour is coming when they're going to hear the voice of the Son of Man